All right, folks, welcome. Today we're going to take on a little bit of a project. It's a simple thing, actually, but doesn't necessarily mean it's easy, if that makes sense. So what we have here is a electrical fireplace that hangs on the wall, and there's no outlet up there for it. And what I don't want to do is just put an outlet. In the event we move or we decide to move this thing somewhere else, suddenly I have a wall outlet. And the hole that you need to make in drywall for an outlet box is a little bit bigger than the hole you need to make for a simple electrical cable. In other words, it would be easier to fix a smaller hole than a bigger hole in the event we move this thing somewhere. So step one, obviously, is I've kind of gone through here. I've used a stud finder to kind of find where the studs are. I've also popped off what I'm going to do. But my plan is to tap into this. I was looking into tapping into the outlet down here, but I would have to go through at least one or two studs to get over here. And the other thing too is I had the option of taking the power cord from this and running it through the wall and just plugging it in the wall somewhere. But something like this that draws a lot of amperage, you don't want to use extension cords, which is what I would have to make this work. Fortunately, this thing comes with the option to remove the power cord and attach your own line to it. So I'm going to run regular household wiring, power wiring, from here or down there directly into here, and there's connections for that in here. And so you can see where I put a little X marks the spot where I'm going to drill my hole, and I'm going to have the power lines coming out of here and tapping into the 3 points here for the ground, hot, and neutral. So when deciding whether to go with the outlet down there or right here, I looked at the number of studs I would have to go through, the proximity to where I need the power to come out of, and obviously this was the best choice. And so what I've done is pop the cover off to take a look inside. This switch controls this ceiling light fixture here. But there's a single power line that runs into here, and they've tapped off of this to power an outlet. I'm pretty sure it's an outlet because the cable heads downward, which means it's somewhere down here. They wouldn't head down to power something that's up. And the only thing really that's over here is that outlet along the wall there. So they've got a power line that comes in here. It looks like it comes from the bottom left corner of this switch box. The light fixture line goes up to the upper left, and then the outlet that I talked about goes down to the lower left. So what I did was just kind of mark what was what with tape, and to make sure that when I disassemble this, that I get it all put back together. Obviously, as I popped all this off and I start looking at it, I've got the circuit breaker off at the circuit breaker box. The other thing I did was get it's a voltmeter, but it's an ohms tester. It tests volts AC, amperage AC, volts DC, amperage DC, etc. To test this to make sure that indeed I did have the right circuit breaker, and then indeed the switch is powering what I think it's powering. Plus I used it to identify which set of these three lines coming in to this box was indeed the source of the power, because that's what I want to tap into, obviously. The other good news is that this is not very long. I'm not going to need a lot of electrical wiring. It's going to be easy to snake it through here. You can almost pull this out and probably go down through this direction, then find it here and then pull it through. And obviously it's not going to be expensive, given that I'm only going to go about 24 inches or so. The other good news is, given that this distance is short, I'm not drilling through studs or anything like that, and I don't have to worry about trying to snake stiff electrical wiring through drill holes through studs that are going to be at a strange angle, because I have to come in through this box here. So next step is to disassemble this, only to the extent to which I need to be able to pull this electrical box out, because I need to be able to pull that out, feel up in here, make sure that I am indeed correct in saying that there's not a stud here. By the way, I also use a stud finder to verify. So, but I need to just physically do that. And I got to move it out of the way anyway to run the line up in here. So that's where we're at right now. I'm not going to waste your time, and I will, and you can see where my little connector fell off there. I had that on there just temporarily while I turned the power back on to make sure that I wanted to test a couple things. But anyway, I'm going to kill it now to save you time, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, got the switch box out of the wall. Notice how I left the wires in the quadrants that I had talked about already. I say quad as if there's four, there's three, but I mean in the corners. Remember, we had the one going up to the ceiling fixture. We had the one that's the power. This is our hot. and this is the one going down to what I proposed to be that outlet there. It took a little bit of trouble because this is one of the nicer ones. It has the, I call them the toenails. That's what my granddad used to call it when you put a nail in at an angle to attach something. So I had to deal with these nails. They weren't used, but they were still in there, which caused this to be wider than the hole cut for the outlet box, because obviously this was installed and the drywall was put over it. When they cut the drywall, they only cut to a dimension that's needed to make use of it, not install this electrical box. So you can see the tab's even wider than the box itself, so it was wider than this cut here, so I had to jimmy it out of there. And then to get the nail out, I'll just show you real quick. With the box still in here, I should have filmed it. I got this screwdriver, and the nail head was right there, and I held the box with one hand and then pushed the screwdriver against the head as far as I could to back that nail out. I squirted some with a straw so I wouldn't make a mess, some WD-40 in these two little holes right here, one right there and one right there, because I found that this house is over 10 years old, so needless to say, those nails have been in there a while. That WD-40 helped. And then when this the width of this screwdriver was not enough to catch the nail when it was way back in here, I just used this file, because obviously it's got a wide head on it, if you will. And you know, I made sure to be careful that I didn't mess up the drywall with that file. So now that I got the hole open here, the next step is I'm just going to check up in here, and what do you know, there's a stud. So I'm going to have to drill through it and then snake a wire or something to go from here to my spot right there. So the next step is to get a long drill bit, and I have, and to come in at an angle, drill through that stud, and to drill through that, come in at an angle, drill through that stud. That's the next step, and then run that. So it's a little bit bothersome that we have studs here, and then right around the corner we got one here. It's probably because I've got an upper story, and perhaps this is load bearing, and so it is what it is. I'd rather do that than have to fight running power all the way from that outlet down here. So I'm gonna drill that hole, and when I'm set up for that drilling, I will come back. All right, here we are. Got the drill bit. The drill bit. I went with, my granddad used to call these duck bill bits, a spade bit. One, because it's got the guide point on it, whatever you want to call it, that allows me to come in at the piece of the wood at an angle, like so, which at the same time allows me to drill without tearing up the drywall. I'm going to go at a slight angle up, and then that will help me feed this through the stud in there, and we'll go from there. I've got the cords and all that pushed out of the way. By the way, this bottom right set of wires, indeed I was correct, it does feed that outlet, because when I tried to plug the drill into that outlet, it didn't work. So I'm going to drill. I'm going to hold this steady with two hands, so I'm going to stop filming for a second and then come back to you. All right, successful. The hole is drilled through there. You can kind of see it a little bit in that dark area. I had to move some. It's strange. This is an interior wall, and yet it's insulated. I don't know if that's standard, but anyway, so it worked out fine. Hit the drywall a little bit here again, the cover. I removed the switch. Remove the switch and switch box, or the wires that are coming out of it. Bottom right goes the outlet over there. Bottom left is the power source, and the upper one is the one that goes to the light fixture up here. So I put the electric fireplace back on the wall. I'm not sure if I showed that earlier. And then mark the position of where I want the exit hole to be for the wiring. Now this isn't but 18 inches, but you know, the wiring's not that expensive at the local hardware store, so I bought 48 inches of it to give me plenty to spare. I can coil it up inside, I can cut it to length, but I'd much rather have ample hanging out of either one of these, so I can, you know, cut the insulation off, strip each line, attach it, and then with help put the thing back up here, and then feed the cord back into the wall as I do so. And then snake it as required here. The electrical box, I think I showed this earlier. This was kind of a challenge to get this thing out of there, and it's going to be a challenge to get it back in. So I think I'm going to either replace this or just take a Dremel tool to that little notch right there and take that thing off. Same thing there with the bottom. May actually cut off that whole thing because it wasn't used to mount. They just drove screws right through the side of it. In fact, you can see one of the holes right there to mount it to the wood frame of the wall right there. So it's time to drill. I'm plugged in. Got my drill bit, and now I'm just going to go here. I've marked the spot with masking tape. So what I'm going to do is, in fact, I made a note to go with the upper part of the masking tape to the hole. So I'm going to start a little pilot hole. Now I've got that as a mark, so I can remove the tape now, because if you just drill with the tape gets all wrapped up around the bit and it makes a mess. Ideally, I would have a little shot back here to catch the mess, but I'm just going to do it as is here. I'll lean into it. Good news is there's no wood behind here. That would be problematic. A little bit of insulation again on an interior wall. I'm not quite sure. Maybe some of you can comment and tell me why you would do that. But the good news is it's a clean cut. I don't feel anything there. And now I can snake the wire up through my hole. I've already drilled through the 2x4 stud and then back through here, and that'll be the next step. So I'm going to pause for now, do that, and then come back. Got a string now, twine running through the hole. Had to fight with some insulation through here, and then out the hole that I drilled, and then out the switch box hole in the drywall. How I did that was this. Well, I used the electrical cable that I'm going to use to wire this whole thing, and I went through this direction a bunch of times and just pushed and pushed to push as much insulation out of the way as I could through here. I also did the same thing coming down through here, pushing downward to get that out of the way, just to create a good path right here. Then I took the twine and I tied a loop on the end, actually a couple loops, and then I taped the twine to the end of my power cord here. And it's actually a perfect, even though it's electrical cord, it's still perfectly designed for snaking through this hole here and out here. And so what I did was snake it through here just to the entrance of the hole I drilled. There was no way I could get the cable, the power cable, to come all the way through and pop out here. I can't get it to make those turns, but I can get it just to the hole that I had drilled here earlier that you all saw. And then I took this kind of slightly stiff wire, made a little hook on the end, peeked through here, and just inside there I could see the tip of the cable with the loop on the end there. And so I just reached in there a couple times till I grabbed the loop and then gently pulled on it. And the twine was, you can see the masking tape on the end of the cable there. The twine was just simply taped on there. I didn't wrap the twine around the cord or anything like that. It just ran parallel to it. And then a couple pieces of that blue masking tape. And that way, once I hooked it here, I could just pull it and it would gently come undone. I could pull it through. I probably should have used a longer piece of twine so I don't accidentally pull the end through here and then I have to start all over, and it wasn't an easy process. So I tied a screwdriver on here just in case something gets pulled here. My twine isn't going to go down through there, because I'm going to snake the power cord up through here and then out here, which is easier to do than go down here. But to snake the twine, it was easier to come through here downward than it was to come up here, because the hole in the stud doesn't quite go vertically as much as I would like to be able to make this climb. But this, obviously, I can snake it down there and make that angle. So the next step now is to attach this twine back to my cable, and this time I will physically tie it on there and then do my best. I'm going to put a bend to the cable so it automatically wants to naturally bend up in this direction until I see it up through here, and then I'll loop it and try my best to pull it through. And then I'm going to do that step now and then show you when I'm done. I wanted to show this to you guys before I proceed. What I did was strip the insulation back on here. Obviously I've hooked the ground for this on my loop, and then I've cinched up, where are we at? Bent the wire over here so that the loop doesn't come undone inside the wall, because I would have to start the whole snake the twine through the wall process over again. The neutral and the hot line I've just cut off. There's no sense in it being out there getting in the way, dragging across the insulation, making it difficult to put this through the hole that I drilled inside there, etc. Well, aren't you going to need that later? No, because I got plenty to work with here. I bought 4 feet to cover 18 inches, so it's probably a little excessive, but then when this is all done and I get it snaked through the hole here, I'll just cut this thing right here and strip it normally, like strip it down for normal use. So I'm going to snake this through and then come back to you here in a second. All right, done. So there's, I think, at least one, if not two 2x4s here. And again, why, I'm not sure, probably load bearing or something. But the point is, this home electrical wiring is not going to go through that hole and immediately cut a 90-degree angle and start heading up. You've got to go horizontal for quite a ways to put a lot of extra cable material up here, then pull on the string to bring it inside the wall up to here. If you try to hack this corner right here and bring it up immediately, it isn't going to happen. You're going to end up pulling on this thing for dear life and probably breaking the twine, then you got to start all over. So what I did was push plenty of wire in here, and I got probably to about this far, pulled on the string a little bit till it got, you know, a little bit difficult to pull, pushed some more cable through, and eventually just worked its way up here. So there's all kinds of excess probably in here. Of course, I pulled out all kinds of insulation because we talked about earlier, there's insulation in this interior wall. But this is a great example when you're doing a project like this, whether it's woodworking, electrical wiring, plumbing. You know, when you go to the store, the stuff's inches for a couple extra feet. I'm sorry, cents for a few extra inches, maybe 98 cents for an extra foot of this stuff. Just buy plenty, and then you don't have to worry about this. If I had gotten just, let's say, 8 inches more than what I thought I'd need straight line distance, there's no way I would have been able to do this. But with 48 inches, I got plenty of slack here, plenty of extra here. I can cut this here, strip my 3 lines, and have plenty to work with. Plus, once this is done, when I mount this, I'm going to end up pushing this back into the wall to hide this, and so this gives me that flexibility to do that too as well. So got it snaked through, and I will strip this down. I'm probably going to cut this to length first, strip my wires, and then I'll cut this to length later, and we'll do the switch box and feed it into the power lines here. See you. All right, so back again, you saw the part where we snaked this cable through here and came out the hole that I drilled earlier there, and I think you saw that part too as well. So I stood the electric fireplace up on its end on the piano bench here. My wife held it up. I pulled plenty of slack through here, stripped the ends, bent them at a 90-degree angle, because that's what's required to get into the fittings in the back of the electric fireplace. My wife continued to hold the thing and balance it up. And by the way, I measured the total height of this plus the height of the piano bench, so I would know where this thing stood, so I would know about how much to pull out of the wall, because what I didn't want to do is get all that over here and then find out I needed to pull more cable out. So again, back to the previous comment, I only need about 18 inches, but I bought 48, and that is why, so I would have plenty to work with. So again, strip the ends of the wires, put them in the mounts in the back. They're little screw fittings, tighten them up, make sure they were bent at 90-degree angle. Wife, as I held this thing with both hands and slowly moved it against the wall, she fed the wiring into the wall. And of course, it's pretty stiff stuff, so it took a little bit to get it fed. The mounting brackets on the back do not give you hardly any leeway, so I marked the left and right edges, if you will, of the bracket that's mounted to the wall. And then the slot on the fireplace itself, I marked the center of the slot with a mark, and simply all I did was eyeball it. So put this thing against the wall, put that mark between those 2 marks, same thing here, and then just against the wall and slid it down. And they caught the catches on the back, caught the mounting bracket square as it should be. And there you have it. There was a little bit of excess still poking out here. You can see just a little bit here. There's really no way to hide that. I mean, maybe a strip of black foam or something right here. Maybe I'll come up with something, but had to feed a little bit of extra wiring in there. There is just a tad bit of play here, but that's due to the bracket itself and not necessarily the cable here pushing out. So the next step is to cut this to length, put another hole in the switch box to accept this 4th line, because we got 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, 4 set. If you remember earlier, this was a pain to get out because of this nail guide or whatever you call the thing here, this tab. So I think I'm actually going to go out there with a Dremel or a hacksaw, take that off. Also, these things are, in my opinion, inadequately small to feed cabling through, and yet be able to move this thing around freely to get it to where you want to. So I want the cables to be able to move a little bit more freely inside here. So I'm actually going to Dremel these out too as well. I'm going to go out into the garage and do that here in a little bit. All right, went out to the garage and did a little work on this electrical box. Remember that nail mounting bracket, if you will, whatever you call it. So I cut that off on both ends. Plus there's a little notch that overhung right here. So I cut those off on both ends, on both sides. And then the holes, by the way, when you flip these tabs in, you actually have to break them in, but they're still there and they serve kind of as a one-way gate. Once that cable's in there, you can't pull it back through. So in my mind, it would make it difficult to adjust this and get it where you want it. And I'm not in the mood to fight cabling. So I broke those tabs completely off and then used the Dremel tool to make these holes a little bit bigger in both dimensions. Like they say, it wasn't born pretty, but it was born alive, meaning these cuts aren't the cleanest. I understand that, but it's going inside a wall and they serve their purpose. Besides, I think that Dremel tool, sometimes on plastic, melts its way through more than it does cut. So what I'm going to do now is snake these through the holes in the electrical box. Cut this one to about right here as well, snake it through, and then reconnect all the wiring back to my hot line power supply right here. And then all these feed, again, the outlet, the electric fireplace, and the overhead light. All right, switch box is now installed, mounted, and I've screwed it against the number of, I told you there's 2 or 3 2x4s right here. Snaked it up, as you can see through here, through the corners. These are the holes in the box itself that I cut bigger. This is the power line that's going to go to the electric fireplace. And then this goes to the overhead fixture. And this is my power source from the circuit breaker box. This is at a little bit of an angle. I'm not overly pleased with that. So what I'll do is I'll assemble it all, and then if the faceplate does not sit flush against the wall, then I'll back this out and readjust it, or I'll do something to figure it out. So anyway, kind of wanted to show you the progress so far, and there is a good reason why all of this is done before the painting is done. Anyway, I'm gonna now hook up the wiring and I'll be back with you. All right, just about got this project complete. I've got all the wires all connected. Remember I had the outlet down here. I've got the electric fireplace, the overhead light. Obviously the overhead light controlled by the switch here, and then I have the hot line coming from this bottom left corner. Everything connected. One of the things I've found that's always easier on this, for example, when you're connecting all the neutral lines together with one of these caps, when the lines come out at multiple lengths, it makes it difficult once it's all connected to get it pushed back in here and managed easily. So all of these neutral lines had different lengths. I figured out how far out I wanted these things to come, where I was going to cut them, where I was going to strip them. I twist them first with a pair of pliers so that they're physically held together by a method other than, you know, just the cap. And an extra one down here. And then it makes it easy too to just do one simple bend and fold and stuff in here, if that's the term you want to use, versus having to do multiple, especially with the new wire I bought for this thing, because my local store didn't have 10 amp. I bought 15 amp, and it's a little thicker, a little more stiff, and more difficult to bend around inside there. So that's what I did. I did that with the ground, the neutral, and the hot lines. Cut them all to about the same length, twisted them together, and then put the caps on. And now I've got everything hooked up here to the switch to include the power and the ground. And now I'm going to screw the switch on and the plate, and I'll give you one last thing. By the way, before I stuffed all this in here, I turned the circuit breaker back on, tested this, it worked, tested the light, it worked. I didn't test the outlet because I'm lazy, but I will plug it in here in a little bit and make sure it works. But if these work, then I know that outlet should be working. All right, all complete. Cord is hidden, hot wired to the switch. I can turn it on through its own remote. Piano works, overhead light works, and everything works as it's supposed to. So project complete, happy with it, and the wife will be happy. I guess that's the important part, and I'm happy because I can move on to something else. I hope you enjoyed.